Good evening, everybody. Welcome to CWU Live. Delighted to be here for a special show tonight, a retired members Fringe. So we're in the middle of a 3-day engagement event where we're debating a variety of topics throughout the union. But we couldn't let our retired members miss out, and we couldn't let our young members miss out. So we've added 2 additional sessions, both in the evening. Delighted to have with me tonight Tony Kearns, the Senior Deputy General Secretary of the CWU. Good evening, Tony.
Evening.
And also Norman Candy from the Retired Members Committee. Good evening, Norman.
Good evening.
So the plan for tonight, everyone, as I can see you all piling on, which is great, is for Tony's going to give an overview of the work that the union does with its retired members. Norman's also going to give some commentary on the union's campaign and the wider campaign to protect the triple lock in amongst the pension. So that's a critical session as well. But most importantly of all, both of our speakers are here to hear from you and to get questions, and for you to put policy to them, put ideas to them, challenges, whatever you want to put across, really. We'll make sure that the guys get to answer it for you. So without any further ado, the only thing I'll say to you is, if you could let us know where you're watching from, let us know how long you've been a member of the union. We'll put the best of those up on screen and also get thinking on your questions. So before all that, though, over to Tony Kearns. Tony.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Chris. And thanks for coming on, Norman, and welcome to everybody else. So as Chris said, we're in the middle of a 3-day engagement event. We're calling it an online festival. We had to cancel our conference early in the year because of the coronavirus pandemic. And the way things are looking, the way things are panning out, there's a fair chance that we would have to cancel or we won't be having next year's conference, because the 6 months that the government has announced for further extreme measures, if you like, will run right through to when our conference will be. And usually at conference, we have a fringe meeting, a retired members fringe meeting. And of course, those people who attend the retired members fringe meeting are usually delegates to conference, if you like, retired members activists. And so it's easy to pitch, if you like, a contribution at that audience, because these are people who've been in and around activism within the union for quite some time. So I'm not entirely sure what our audience is made up of here, whether it's all activists, but we'll have to assume that there are some lay members, as we like to term them. On that basis, it's just to give you a quick overview of the way the union represents its retired members. At national level, we have a retired members committee, which is made up of people who are elected from around the country. We've got representatives from Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and England who are voted on by the membership to sit on a retired members council, whose, if you like, role is to look at the issues that affect retired members in wider society. It used to be an advisory committee to advise the national executive when it was making such decisions. But actually what we've done to enhance the role of retired members in the union is to have a directly elected retired member to sit on our National Executive Council, not just as it used to be in the capacity just to deal with retired members' issues, but somebody who actually can participate in all the debates and most of the votes, except the financial ones, and more importantly, is elected, if you like, from the membership. So it's not as we used to have, which was the chair of the Retired Members Advisory Committee, but somebody actually elected on behalf of those members who can get to speaking rights and voting rights. It enhances the role of, if you like, the retired members in the union. Out in the regions, we have retired members regional committees with a regional secretary in each of those regions. And on a branch level, we have a majority, but not all branches, have a retired members section. Actually, if you happen to be in a branch that doesn't have a retired members section, you should contact your branch and ask about setting one up. And if you can't do it through that way, then feel free to contact us at CWU headquarters, and we'll put you in touch with the retired members regional secretary, who is there to assist in doing that. And so those various bodies throughout the union have a role for, if you like, looking after and dealing with retired members' issues throughout the whole of the organisation. And of course, we do that now, currently, against the background that we've never experienced before. This lockdown period, an extension to the lockdown period, has seen the union have to operate in a number of different ways. But of course, for retired members, as for the elderly in society, they face a whole host of different issues, one of which, of course, is the debate about the state pension and the situation with the triple lock. Norman is going to speak on the actions that we've been taking and the activity we've undertook around the issue of the triple lock. Of course, we've then got the issue of the free TV licenses, as they were called, for over 75s. I think there was a misunderstanding of language there. They were free to the user, but actually they were always paid for. And this is where the debate has come in. They were funded licenses, but what the government has done now is reduce the funding to the BBC for those, and the BBC, in cost-cutting exercises, has decided they can no longer afford to fund those licenses for over 75. And in the latest twist, we're picking up that how that's going to be dealt with is, whereas if you previously failed to have a TV license, that was considered to be a criminal offence, it's now going to be dealt with as a civil matter. So what you're likely to see, failing to pay the TV license, is bailiffs at the door, dealt with that way, where you would probably end up, if you like, blacklisted on for credit ratings. And so, if you like, what the government's done there typically is pass the buck to somebody else. If you like, that would take the blame and carry the can for their actions, which is typical of this government. I think one of the things that shows up, if you like, is I think the biggest thing that we face when it comes to the elderly in society. It's actually the narrative that we use around the very aging population. So the fastest growing demographic part of the population in this country are people who are aged 85 and over. All the predictions are that people are going to live longer. All the predictions are that the elderly in society are going to become, if you like, a much larger group than we currently see. And that brings with it a number of issues that are going to have to be dealt with. But the problem we've got, fed mostly by the media, is that this is presented as a crisis. So the idea that people living longer is not a good thing is a new narrative that we're seeing to creep in now. Elderly people, if you like, in stories in the press, you constantly see the word crisis, you see the word burden. This is the language around older people. And what this leads to is two things. What this leads to is, if you like, higher forms of discrimination against older people in society, and also their use of, if you like, facilities such as the care system, the NHS system, is portrayed as a drain. It's portrayed as a burden on the NHS. It's portrayed as a burden on the care in society. It's why you hear about crisis in care for the elderly, and it presents a negative, if you like, slant on getting old in society. And I think one of the challenges we all face is to change that narrative. We have to find a way of, if you like, developing a language that presents living older as a positive, and not a negative. To refuse to refer to this in future as a crisis, to refuse to refer to the issues that are going to affect the elderly in society as a burden. I think that's the challenge that faces us. So, I mean, as a general overview of what we do and the major issues that face the elderly in society, I just wanted to make that introduction. You know, as Chris said at the beginning, this is an opportunity for us to hear your views, your suggestions, your comments, and some insight into the issues that you're facing, how you think this union should respond to those. So thanks for that. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Tony. Brilliant, and lots of good feedback already from the members. It's phenomenal to see so many of you online as well. So you're really pleased we put this session on, because you're definitely getting a great response. Also, it's so inspiring to see the list of people in their union service, Tony and Dorman. John, 41 years, Dot, 50 years, Rab, 56 years, David, 55 years. David also put a half on the end there, so 55 and a half. So great stuff, and keep them coming, and we'll keep sharing them. Norman, would you like to give an update now on the triple lock?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Right, first thing I'd like to do is thank all those reps throughout the country who got involved in the campaign. It's been going for about 6 months now, with, I think, a bit of success. We on a regular basis we post things on the retired members Facebook page on a daily basis, and it's become one of the most popular subjects on there. In fact, we get like sort of 6-7 times the normal number of visits for anything to do with the triple lock than we do other issues. So it's clear an important issue for our members out there, because they're taking an interest in it and they're following it. I mean, at the moment, I think it's fair to say that in the trade union movement, and I'm not talking about the National Pensions Convention, because they're doing some great work on this, and other groups are as well. But I think in the trade union movement, we're a lone voice at the moment. Other than a couple of weeks back, I got contacted by a fella called Malcolm Eastwood, who's a member of the Fire Leaders Association, which is part of Prospect, trade union Prospect. He was one of the people who was involved in the firefighters' court case regarding their pension and the changes that were imposed on their pension scheme, which they won. And it was quite a significant victory, not just for the firefighters, but for the whole of the civil service and government workers. So he contacted us, and I've been in close contact with us, and we're trying to expand the number of people and the other unions that we've got involved. But it's quite a difficult job doing that, I must admit. Now, on the triple lock itself, the good news is that the pensions minister announced last week that apparently under the previous bill covering the triple lock, there was a clause in it which said that if there was no increase in wages in the year, that the triple lock didn't come in. So not even the experts apparently knew that this was, had taken any notice that this was in the old bill. Now that is now going to be changed, and the minister responsible is going to put what they call a technical bill to Parliament, which will change that, and it will guarantee in 2021 the 2.5% increase on the state pension. So that's the good news. The bad news is that the relentless campaign against it hasn't stopped. Even after that announcement, there was an article in the Daily Telegraph saying that it's trying to stir up what they call intergenerational conflict, saying, oh, there's a lot of people who won't like this. It discriminates against younger people, which is absolute rubbish. Because in actual fact, the fact is that the younger generation stand, or people who haven't yet retired or coming up to retirement, or even younger than that, they stand to make more out of the triple lock than people who are actually retired. I mean, it's a fact that people who are retired, they've got a limited lifespan. Whereas if you're in your 30s or your 20s, and that state pension is going to increase by a minimum of 2.5%, for the next number of years up until you retire, that's going to increase your state pension considerably. So it actually gives more benefit to youngsters than it does to existing pensioners, although it's a very good deal for pensions at the moment. Now, the other thing is that as I said, the campaign against it is relentless. There's 4 or 5 think tanks that are constantly bringing out papers condemning it. You've also got groups in the House of Lords who have condemned it and are trying to get it changed. And believe it or not, this week, the Labour minister, after the government announced that they were going to protect this triple lock, they questioned the Labour minister, or someone did, about whether Labour would guarantee it, and she said that they weren't willing to make that commitment, and that is a big danger, and that is not something that we want to tolerate. So look, I mean, as we move this forward, thanks everyone for getting involved. It has an effect. We need to get other unions involved. We need to link up with those other unions and broaden the campaign and make it part of the union's general campaign. The New Deal for Workers, through the CUC, other unions involved, TUC, and try and change the policy of the Labour Party. But thanks everyone who put some work into it, written to their MPs, and campaigned on behalf of the policy.
Thank you, Norman. One of the things I'm always sort of pushing when we're doing these sessions on live, I'm always a little bit nervous, particularly at this point of the session when it comes out to questions of will we have enough questions to keep it flowing? Will I be able to fill in? One group of people I know there'd be no need to fill in with is our retired members, because the questions are coming absolutely piling in. That's brilliant. So keep them coming. We're delighted, and this is what the session's all about. So a quick fire one. I'll put to you first, Tony. Leslie, who's watching from Spain, former NEC official, of course. Stick it up on the screen there for you, mate. Are retired members still able to use the will service?
I think so. It's actually a question for the. I mean, to be honest, it's actually a question for the legal department. But well, if it's changed, I haven't been notified of the change, so I'm assuming that is the case. Unless Norman knows anything.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tony. It's done through the legal department now. Can't think of their name.
Union line.
Sorry?
Union line. Union line.
And you do it online. It's all done online. And I think there's various levels. You can have like a basic will, or you can have a more complicated one. But it can be done, and it still is available for retired members.
Go on, Tony.
And hello, Leslie, and hello, Maher, if they're both on there. Thing.
Okay, so here we go straight in with the more deeper questions. I come to you first, Tony, then back to Norman. Andrew Scott for Plymouth and East Cornwall, retired member secretary, says, do you think that the state pension will be scrapped in the future? I think he's aiming there at the continued attacks on it from perhaps this government and maybe some of its predecessors. Tony?
Well, a pretty deep and a pretty worrying question. So nobody's ever mentioned it. It's as I say, it's a worrying question. Listen, with this government, I would rule nothing out. I mean, the point I made earlier about the biggest demographic growth in this country is through an aging population. Over 85s are the biggest growth areas. People live longer. It's also a problem for the trade union movement. The biggest single, if you like, block in the trade union movement is people over 50, and as they move into retirement. And of course, what that means is that the cost of providing a state pension is going to get proportionally bigger year in, year out. And this is the thing that Lucy Powell talked about, that Norman referred to about the triple lock. As I think in future governments will look at the state pension. I think they will look, and I think if this is why if you like, the pension that they bought in themselves, that they want companies to pay into, even though the contribution rates are only around 1%, 2%, 3%. I can't remember the exact figures. Nest, as they call it, was a way of getting people to fund their own pension. Which, of course, the more people fund their own pension, the more the government will have an excuse to, if you like, to roll back. So I think what we're going to find is, after this pandemic, if this government doesn't deal with it right, which is our fear, that if you like, the so-called debt or deficit that the country runs, just on the way they currently measure the economy, will increase. And of course, this government, and I suspect successive governments, will then look to, if you like, scale back on public spending, whether that be they attack the NHS, whether that be a complete shutting down of central government, or whether that be an attack on the state pension is anybody's guess. But I certainly wouldn't sit here now today and say that in this country, the state pension as we know it, as it is currently funded into the levels we currently fund it, is likely to continue. I wouldn't be having a bet on that, to be perfectly honest with you.
A quick follow up as we try and Norman's back with us. That's good news. Damien, if you can see on the screen there, Tony, linked in what you said. I'll ask both of you to come in on this one. Must have been reading our minds, Damien. 35 years a member. What's your thoughts on what Lucy Powell MP has said? Tony, then Norman.
Distinctly unimpressed, if I'm being absolutely honest. I think, the language that she used was so what she said was, if I remember rightly, and it's not verbatim, but she said something like, the government, she was asked in an interview, the government's committed to funding a triple lock next year and increasing the pension, the point Norman made. Is Labour going to do that? And she said, I'm not prepared to get into that now. And the interviewer was like, what, you mean you're not prepared to talk about what your policy is? And she said, and it was something like this, Norman, correct me if I'm wrong, well, right now, we don't know if we're going to start to see levels of unemployment of 2-3 million or more, and there will be a cost to that. At that point, she said something about balancing off growth in the economy, what that raises in taxes, and the cost of unemployment. And so it will be reviewed at that time, which if the current Labour Party hasn't got a line in the sand to look after the elderly in society, then I'm not entirely sure what its purpose is. if I'm being perfectly honest with you. So I'll go back to what I said. Just distinctly unimpressed with the statement that was made.
Norman.
Yeah, Tony's spot on. It's almost word for word. I think what she did say. I think certainly not impressed by what she said at all. And but I think what it shows is how much work we got to do. We need to do a bit of work with the Labour Party, with the TUC. I've got to say, I'm not that impressed with the TUC. There's one fella on the TUC. Believe it or not, his name's Jack Jones, and he's quite good on it. He's their pensions spokesman, but the TUC as a body never seems to get behind the campaigns, and I don't think has been giving the campaign a lot of support. We can influence the Labour Party. We can influence it through the union, but through our members who are activists in the Labour Party. So we'd urge every one of them to raise that issue if they can through their constituency party.
Thank you, Norman. So a question again for both of you here. Put two to you at one go because we've got so many coming up, which is fantastic. Same vein, Joe here, as you can see on your screen, what can be done to recruit and retain more members on retirement? And then also follow-up one is John Farnham. One for Norman, how is the subgroup on recruitment getting on? So shit fits in together. I'll come to you first, Tony.
Okay. How can you get what can we do about getting more retired members involved? Well, to some extent, that's a bit more difficult today than it used to be. There used to be, if you like, a proper retirement age that everybody in the workplace knew they were going to get to that point and retire. And so and the employer, therefore, used to have a list of people that were coming up for retirement on certain dates. And they used to send that to the union. And the union was able to go into the workplaces and identify those people and therefore try and recruit them. Because people leave at different ages now, we've experienced this ourselves, whereby people who leave before what they consider to be retirement age, and I think this is something that we're going to have to think about, is that you say to people, well, why don't you join the retired member section? And people go, well, I'm not retired. I've taken some bits and pieces that the company was offering. I've left early. I don't consider myself to be a pensioner. I've still got some life left in me and I've got some years to go. And I might even go and find alternative employment. It's just my time was right with the money on offer to leave the employer I work for, Royal Mail or BT predominantly, because that's where 95% of our members are. So we don't see people hitting that, if you like, state retirement age and leaving like we used to. And that makes it much more difficult. One, because we don't know when people are going to leave until they've left. And two, because a number of people don't consider themselves to be retired. So there might be a thing in what we're calling ourselves there about retired members. We might have to find a way to have, if you like, an older section, but not just call it retired, because that ranges everything from people. You could have anybody who's left on a deal from the employer in their 50s, right the way through. Well, my dad's 87, so right the way through to people of that age. That's a big block of people with a big variety of interest, and maybe we need to, if you like, broaden the parameters about what we do and what we campaign on. Maybe that's the answer.
Thank you, Tony. Norman?
Hello? Yeah, look, hello, John. On the question of the subgroup that we set up, I mean, the problem's been, it's the same with everything, not just in the trade union movement, but everywhere. The coronavirus has made everything so difficult. A lot of us on the committee have got ideas about how we can improve recruitment and ideas for retaining people in the union, keeping in contact with them. But unfortunately, the chance of meeting and getting together and expanding those ideas, because you'd have to have a number of meetings to do it. You couldn't do it in one meeting. You'd have to have exchange of ideas and documents coming out of it. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to move it forward, but I'm sure as soon as circumstances allow it, that committee will be up and running, and we'll be asking people to get involved, and we'll be moving that issue forward.
Thanks, Norman. So Angela here is going to test how radical you're both feeling tonight. So Angela from the Greater Manchester branch, would you advise people over 70 not to pay the TV license, Tony?
it's not our role to advise people to act illegally.
Norman, is that your answer as well?
Yeah, well, yes, it's got to be in it. I mean, yeah, we could end up in incitement to cause a riot or something. But you know, I've got personally, if I was over 75, I wouldn't be paying it. If I was due to pay it, and I will be in 3 years' time, I will be making a stand. But I'm not encouraging anyone else to do that. They'll have to do that themselves. There's a group that's been set up that are campaigning against it, and they're not telling people not to pay it, but what they're encouraging people to do is to appeal against it so many times, write so many letters, that the administrators of the license get snowed under with with problems from people who are appealing against having to pay it. I can't think of their name at the moment. It's Silver Voices or something like that. They seem to be pretty well organised, and you can find them on if you Google. But I mean, I personally, I hope some over 75s make a stand and people get behind them. But we can't, as unions, advise people to do that.
Thanks, guys. So many questions coming in. Trying to pick through them, which is fantastic. Oh, just to let you know, by the way, we've had 2,500 views across all of our platforms, and for the retired members watching this, just so you know, it's on so many things. We got it going out on the union's Twitter, Dave's Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, CWU, Facebook retired members, and a variety of other platforms. So wherever you're watching us from, and you've managed to get online, and it's great to see so many of you people who have. Welcome to one and all. Damien, what are we doing to get behind the WASPy campaign? Tony?
We've always, we've always supported it. I mean, Norman mentioned to me earlier, there's a court case last week from another group, the Back to 60s campaign, which was similar to the WASPy. I don't know if I don't know if Norman wants to go in that a bit more. But when this issue has come up, it came up with the TUC a couple of years ago. It came up at Labour Party conference and at Fringe meetings, Labour Party conference, and we've always supported that particular campaign.
Thank you, Tony. Norman?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, Damien, I know we had him at the London retired members meeting. Very impressive, the WASPy campaign group. And I think they've done a marvellous job. The Back to 60 group went to court to try and get the legislation reversed. Now, that was always going to be a difficult job, and they didn't win it. At the moment, they're deciding whether or not to appeal against it to the Supreme Court. Now, they funded the previous one, I think it cost £67,000. They funded it through online, people making donations. And that's how they'll have to do the appeal. But they haven't made their mind up whether they're going to do that. The Back to 60, the WASPy women, their campaign comes from a different angle. What they're saying is they accept that their retirement age for those women who were born in the 50s, etc., that they won't retire. They're not going to get state pension till they're 65. But what they're saying is because of the way it was done, it's completely unfair and unjust, and they're looking for assistance and compensation during that period. Now that campaign is still running. I think there's a select committee parliamentary select committee is going to make a statement on it soon. So we'll have to watch that space and see what comes out of it. Thanks,
Norman. So here's one. Chloe, in a wider question, quite a few people have asked, any advice on soon to retire members? And then lots of questions try and bring together because we've got so many. To both of you, starting with Tony again, what would you say to anyone who is active in the union of a younger age on the importance of this union representing, continuing to represent retired members? Because a lot of people might say, oh, they've had their time, they've done their bit, why are we putting resources into that area? So what would you say to our active members? And the flip side of that, what would you say to our retired members about the importance of them staying involved in the union and continuing to support our work? Tony?
Yeah, good question, Chloe. So I think the answer to staying in the union and the retired members is because part of what we've set out as a union, since Dave became general secretary, is this concept of a new deal for workers. But it's not just about what we do in work; it's about reaching out to the communities we live in. We're trying to find a way of engaging with other organisations about making not just the workplace and the reward and remuneration you get for the work you give better than it was, but also to enhance, if you like, the communities you live in. And in that regard, making society a better place to live is a better place to live for all. So in terms of staying in the union to become, if you like, a retired member of the union, I would say what I said at the very beginning. We've got 130, just on 130 branches, and 90 odd of those branches have a retired members section. My advice would be to contact your branch and find out who is the secretary of your retired members section. Announce yourself, tell them you're keen to get involved in any of those campaigns that the union has got going. Once you become retired, if you haven't got a retired members section, as I say, contact us at headquarters. We'll put you in touch with our regional retired members secretary, who will talk you through setting one up. For the retired members, I think what you've got here is an opportunity both to understand what's going on in society from a different perspective. As you get older, your perspective on life changes, partly because of the issues I said before, because of the way society treats you changes. We're seeing a lot more discrimination against the elder people in society. That's documented. It's not just me making that up, but also, we've got, you read it out, Chris, at the beginning, people flagging up on the screen, 35, 40, 43, 42 years of experience. And that's experience that I don't think this union or any union, if you like, any one part of the movement can afford to lose that type of experience. So, the ability to mentor and guide people through some of the trials and tribulations you're going to see, if you like, as trade unionists, both at branch, at local level, with the employer and the national level, I think is an experience that we need to keep hold of. And, so that's why I would say to both groups, become a retired member. For retired members, stay in and out those coming through.
Thank you, Tony. Norman?
Yeah, my advice to anyone come up to retirement is this: that when you retire from work, you don't retire from life. And keep in touch with the people that you used to work with, keep active physically and mentally, and get involved in the union and in issues affecting retired people. It might be a local group or whatever. I've been retired 3 or 4 years now, and the first couple of years it's a bit of a novelty. After that, it becomes a bit of a shock. You start getting into bad habits, watching breakfast TV and what have you, and then you have to say to yourself, I'm not gonna continue like this. I'm gonna get involved in things, and that's what keeps you going, and that's what you've got to do. The union is the best place to keep going as well. Get involved with the retired members section and that sort of stuff, and campaign on a bit, and give the younger members help as well. That's another thing.
Thanks, Norman. I think that slogan there, when you retire from work, you don't retire from life. I think you need to sell that to some holiday companies, mate. I think it would do well there. Cruise ships, I think, could do well off that. So here's a good one, amongst lots and lots of good ones. With Christopher saying that thousands of senior members vote Tory only to see their pensions disappear and their retirement age go up. There's quite a few political questions, including one from Jerry, Tony, maybe you could pick it up in the same contribution, who says, are we going to start interacting with the SNP trade union group? Politics is important in this as well, isn't it? In terms of, people's voice as they retire, continuing that influence, surely.
Yeah. So what we've seen, if you look at the electorate, for example, in terms of age demographics, the biggest group, and I think it's touching 70% of people who vote Tory are the over 70s. And then it scales back slightly if you're over 60, and it starts to scale back to you at the balance of about, I think it's in your 40s, where that balance is more people vote Labour. And there's a real lesson there, not learned by Lucy Powell, clearly, at the weekend. Is that you can't keep disenfranchising, elderly people in society if you're in the Labour Party. And I think what we're seeing here, and it's part of this narrative about, why the Red Wall fell, is sort of discarding, if you like, what, if you like, the real concerns of older people, particularly. I think I read a stat, there's about 1.8 million older people in this country live in relative poverty, in real poverty. And somebody's got to offer them a narrative to that. I think also part of the problem we face is that, we've had, I feel like, 70, 80 years of the welfare state, and a lot of people, I feel like, have been okay in terms of being looked after. Not done really great, but okay. And of course, what you've got is a mainstream media that feeds the narrative now that the country can't afford this anymore. And so people who've got what they've got tend to become conservative with a small c and defend what they've got. And they naturally see, if you like, somehow the Conservatives as being that body that does that. So, there's a lot of dynamics at play there about older people voting Conservatives. I just don't think it's CWU members, actually. It's the population in general. But we have to, you have to deal with that. Listen, the problem we have with not much, but don't want to call it a problem. The issue we have with engaging with other political parties, of course, is we're affiliated to the Labour Party. We're affiliated to the Labour Party, and our political activity has to be to the Labour Party, and that's how that's going to continue for as long as we're affiliated to the Labour Party.
Thank you, Tony. Norman, did you have a view on that one?
I've got a view on the issue of older people voting Conservative, because what Tony says is absolutely true. We had an article in The Voice not so long ago detailing it. I think National Opinion Polls did a survey on it, and it is unbelievable. And it's at 51 people start voting Labour. Start voting Conservative, stop voting Labour. And the reason why, I don't know. It's beyond me. It really is. Because, the last election but one, the Tory MP described the Conservative manifesto. It was when they came out with the thing about charging people to go into care homes and that sort of thing. He described it as like a disaster, and it was. And when I read that, I dug it out and I looked at it, and it had nothing there at all that favoured older people or elderly people, and yet people still vote for them. Now, there's got to be a reason for that, and we've got to find out what it is. The trade union movement, Labour movement's got to find out what it is. Maybe we are not dealing with the things that elderly people want us to deal with. Maybe they've got concerns that we're ignoring. Things like, a lot of older people are very worried about law and order and things like that. And maybe Labour didn't speak to them on that. And maybe it's got to be looked at.
Thank you, Norman. So the other thing we get from this session, I think, which is, fantastic, is just people's passion for the union, if you like. So just put a few up now. So Dot, we will never stop support for our union and help with the campaigns. Nancy says retired members can make a significant contribution within the wider community and continue to support through experience and time issues raised by the CWU family. And Paul here, which I really like, Paul says, I will remain a member, not for what I can get out of it, but for how my membership and support continues to help the union, which I've been a member of 50 years. So thanks, guys. And that's the sort of people, we're dealing with here. It's fantastic to see the sort of members that we've got. Lots of people here really, really praising the union, praising both of your contributions as well. What I'm going to do now at this point, because we committed to doing this for 45 minutes, is ask you both for your summary and some sort of key points you want to get across. I'm going to start with you, Norman, with any final messages to people watching tonight.
Thanks, Chris. Well, just to say, brilliant turnout today. Lots of people coming on and making contributions. Thanks for that. As time goes on, things will improve. the coronavirus problem will be sorted, hopefully, and we can get back to sorting out things like recruitment and how we can expand the influence of the retired members section within the union and amongst our retired members. I think the main thing that I would like people to have a think about and take away from this meeting is the question of the triple lock. The triple lock will be won in the marginals that Labour lost at the last election. Those MPs in those areas must have pressure brought on them over the Conservative MPs. If we can bring pressure on those people in those 60-odd constituencies, then that's going to worry the Conservative Party. They will think twice about next year or the year after changing it, because they recognise that they borrowed those constituencies, and if they don't do the right things, then they're going to lose them at the next election. I hope they do. And the point is that, as far as we're concerned, we can pressurise those constituencies and those Tory MPs, and we should be writing to them, we should be putting pressure on them, etc. So, just thanks to everyone for helping out.
I'm going to ask Tony Kearns to shut the session down now with his final thoughts, and as soon as Tony finishes, we'll be off air. But in doing so, before that, I want to say thank you on behalf of all of us. I know Tony will do that again to all the members that have tuned in. It's a fantastic turnout. We're absolutely delighted with it. And in your summing, Tony, if you could also take this final question from Robert in that summary, because it really does. There's some great feedback here. And Robert says, "Can we have more meetings like this? Many thanks." And lots of people saying similar. So if you could take that into account in your summary, mate, as someone else has just said, again, that'll be brilliant. Thank you, mate.
Well, yeah, I'm up for more meetings of this kind. It's. I mean, you can't have them every week. I think we said we had one 6 weeks ago. I think it would be timely. We have another one about maybe another 6 weeks. We could get Dave along. I think Dave attended the last one, so that'll be. I think that's definitely an idea that we will take away and discuss. Just a few key messages. Norman's mentioned the triple lock, which is clearly vitally important for elderly people. You can't exist in society if you don't have the funds to do that. I did mention the number of people. Age UK estimate elderly people to be living in poverty approaching 2 million, and that can't continue. So definitely keep an eye on that. And the other thing that we can never give up fighting for, both this union and other unions, is this country's NHS. If you look at what's happened over the weekend, starting to be leaked out now. So we talk about privatisation of the NHS. This is not the NHS suddenly having its logo taken away and it being named something else. This is about slowly but surely operations, normal operations, day-to-day stuff that people see. We saw the thing at the weekend about ear syringing no longer being performed on the NHS. Dennis Rose on the Retired Members Advisory Committee highlighted a number of issues he'd found out from his local NHS trust, that they were already talking about not performing anymore. So this isn't the NHS. This isn't like the sell-off we saw in BT or British Gas. It's not what they're going to do with the NHS. What they're going to do with the NHS is bit by bit roll back on the work that they do. And some of those routine things, hip replacements, knee replacements, they're going to get shelved or outsourced to somebody else. And so we need to make sure that we keep on fighting for the NHS. And the other key message, of course, is the one that's come up here, which is about staying in this union to look after yourself, because that's what this union is here to do. But more importantly, the comment that Phil made, which is to ensure that you carve a rollout for yourself in this union that benefits others, that benefits the communities you live in and benefits the members who are coming through for the future. And that's the key message. So once again, thanks to everybody. Thanks to Chris for setting this up. Thanks to the comms team for assisting, and Norman for coming on and giving us time. But most of all, thanks for you for your involvement and for the years you've given to this union, and long may that continue. Thanks very much.